And we are back. Thank you for sticking with me for my little hiatus there. I had a couple of issues going on. We might get into it later, but as for now, let's get into the episode. Today we're speaking about the Black Rhinoceros, and today's going to be a bit of a shorter one. As you can see from the time, it's a little short, especially for something like this. You probably would expect it to be a bit longer, but unfortunately, that's kind of what it is. So let's start with the environment that we've got going on here. I am making a small mountain range, kind of inspired by a picture of Lesotho that I saw, and I felt like it would have made a nice backdrop for the exhibit itself, give it a bit more character, so that we don't need to really go all out on different types of rocks, foliage, whatever else you may have. Well, let's get into the animal, shall we? So, the Black Rhinoceros, starting with its name, obviously nothing too interesting there, seeing how it is the darker of the two main African rhinoceros species. However, it's also known as the hook-lipped rhino, which is because of its somewhat prehensile upper lip, somewhat similar to the beginning structures of a trunk, but obviously, most likely due to its horn, it will never see that sort of expertise. However, another interesting name that it has is its scientific name. Its scientific name translates directly to two-horned, and that is actually in two names. It is known as Diceros bicornis. So apparently there was no creativity that day because they just named it the same thing in Greek and in Latin and called it a day. But this does also bring to the idea that quite possibly it was the first rhinoceros from Africa that was really noted scientifically. While they may have known something like the Indian rhino, or who knows what other Asian species, they usually have one horn, while African species have two, as we know. So there is a good possibility that that could be the case. Now, jumping back to the exhibit real quick, because I kind of have to speed run, I decided to add a bit more of a deeper, greener foliage to pretty much emphasize the more arid foreground. And it also comes into a decent understanding once we start getting into their local habitat, which, speaking of, consists of areas in the modern day of southern Africa. Most predominantly, their current extent ranges are Angola, Namibia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Tanzania, and Kenya. But, of course, if we are to jump back to the reference I have here for the more lush background that we're going to have, it is also historically known to exist in pretty much every nation that surrounds the Congo Basin. Everywhere north, south, and east. Obviously not west, seeing how that is the ocean. Although it would be pretty impressive to see a rhinoceros in the ocean and actually living there full time. But they have lived in these areas for quite some time, separating from the white rhinoceros roughly 4 to 5 million years ago. Now, while it isn't a name, they do have one of the honorable titles of being part of the Big Five. Yes, this is number 3 on the list of Big Five, and I really hope that we get that African leopard one day so I can actually round it out. If not, I'm going to be very, very sad. So, why is it a part of the Big Five? Let's state the obvious. At 5 foot tall at the shoulder and weighing 2 tons, aka 4,000 pounds, aka whatever Prim tells you, and being able to run 35 miles per hour with 2 giant horns on its face, I mean, that's dangerous enough as it is. But it doesn't help that it notoriously has a very short temper. And that primarily has to do with the fact that it has very poor eyesight. You see, when an animal has poor eyesight, it just has to assume everything around it is a threat. And I do mean everything. Rhinoceros are famous for running and charging at pretty much anything that gets within their territorial range. An area that can, quite honestly, vary dramatically. Pretty much going anywhere from 1.6 to 82 square miles. Because, you know, why be specific when you can just go, it's somewhere in that range. But Whenever something that they are not familiar with is in that range, it is subject to extreme violence. This goes to anything from predators, normal animals, vehicles, people, rocks, trees, termite mounds, you name it, they've probably tried to kill it. That, along with the fact that it has a very thick and sturdy hide, meaning it is pretty damn close to bulletproof, hunting an animal like this would be a death sentence, which is surprising on why poaching is so prevalent for this animal. But, of course, that never stopped anyone before from foolishly thinking that, if your pee-pee don't work, just shave up some rhinoceros horn. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Just keep risking your life to pretty much eat the physical equivalent of ground up fingernails, because that's actually what rhinoceros horns are made out of. It is a material known as keratin. So, unfortunately, poachers constantly kill these poor animals for, again, fingernail dust. Hooray. However, there is a form of hunting that is helping these species thrive, and that's actually a concept that was created that, since they do keep track of all the wild rhinoceros in any one given preserve, they know which rhinos are old and kind of out of their prime and no longer really sustaining a species. So they will mark that animal and auction it off to be hunted by some wealthy person, usually someone from the West, if we're being completely honest, especially from America. And that is actually one of the largest influences in gaining financial support for these conservation areas. Essentially, they will get the animal, raffle off a hunting ticket, that person will come down, spend their own money to get a porter, get guides, equipment, etc. And these raffles can be a ton of money. One actually recently went through for $350,000. And that's not the full price for their expedition. That's just the price for the ticket to hunt the animal itself. So there is some trophy hunting done for good. And it's not just for the rhinoceros. Many animals like lions, elephants, pretty much all the big five are subject to this ideal. Now, unfortunately, I had gone off track there talking about the poaching and the commercialized hunting of the animal. So let me get back to some of the physical characteristics. Some of the notable aspects of it, other than the horn, is that they have extremely poor eyesight. Compared to the size of their head, their eyes are extremely small and are also really poorly placed. Quite honestly, the shape of the rhinoceros head compared to where its eyes are, there's no way it's seen anything. However, it does compensate with a really good sense of smell and a very good sense of hearing, partially due to its evolution of tubular ears. Essentially, a black rhinoceros will have a tube-shaped ear that can rotate 360 degrees so that it can actually hear pretty much anything from a more precise location. Now, as I said previously, they do also have a very thick and sturdy hide. However, it is important to note that it is not impervious, and one thing that they will do to keep themselves from being burnt by the sun or constantly harassed by mosquitoes is they will take mud baths. It's a very common thing for a lot of animals to do, both with and without large quantities of fur, where they will actually roll around in mud in an attempt to pretty much make sunscreen. An interesting concept of culture from an animal that most of us probably don't see as a very intellectual animal. However, it just goes to show that just because they appear to be less than intelligent due to their hyper-aggression doesn't mean that they don't have a form of further cognitive capabilities. Speaking of culture, as we all know, every animal likes to do the tango, and the rhinoceros is no exception. And of course, I'm sure you were wondering, are these horns they have used to win fair maiden? The answer is yes. However, the first line that a black rhinoceros will do, or any rhinoceros, is something known as blustering, where they will snort and hoof and do mock charges in it to scare off the opponent, and the attempt to not actually have to fight, because fighting is dangerous for everyone involved, and if they can avoid it, they're going to. Speaking of mating habits, it is also important to note that rhinoceros do not have many young in any singular breeding session, which is kind of bad for them when it comes to obviously keeping the population intact, especially with human encroachment. As a matter of fact, because of the slow birth rate and high hunting rate, 1900s, it actually led to the rhino's population dramatically dropping all across Africa, hitting a low in 2004 at only 2,410 in the wild. Now, luckily, due to conservation efforts and all sorts of other fun things that we've discussed previously, they have made somewhat of a comeback, reaching the number 6,195 in the year 2022. It's certainly not the numbers it used to be, seeing how back in the 1900s, there were roughly hundreds of thousands of black rhinoceros out in the wild, but they are making a steady comeback. For the most part, they are in a pretty stable condition. They are considered vulnerable still, but they are certainly doing better than other rhinoceros species, like the white rhinoceros, which eventually we will be getting to. Now, unfortunately, as much as I had tried to find cultural influence of the black rhinoceros, there wasn't much I could find. There was general cultural relevance of the rhino, as a whole, and some specifically for the white rhino, but the black rhino seemed to be kind of by the wayside. So I really only have this one large kind of vague description of how many tribal groups in Africa really felt about the rhinoceros. And essentially, the idea is it was a symbol of power, honor, and determination, something that was blessed by God himself, pretty much leading to the idea that it was somewhat of a sacred animal that needed to be respected, although it is important to keep in mind that the African tribes were absolutely willing to hunt them if need be. However, if there were more suitable animals, less divine, then they absolutely would go for that. So that is about the end of my information on the animal. Let's just take a look and see how they are doing in their environment. And as you can see, far too much long grass. And that seems to be a prevailing issue when you don't do much to the exhibit to begin with. So we're going to add short grass, add some soil, add some sand, and really just fill this out, make it a little bit more arid in appearance. There's plenty of space for them, especially if you want to try to go for that conservation style. Make it look more like you're trying to increase the population. It really is good to have a larger environment. Plus, seeing how it is an animal that is notorious for running, it would be good to have a large exhibit like this. Now, as I said at the beginning, I did want to touch upon why I was on my hiatus. Quite honestly, I was going through a bout of depression, having some personal issues. I won't get too into it. I do, however, want to let you all know that when things seem rough, it's only for a short while. Even if you feel like you're at the bottom, it's not going to be like that forever, and it could end tomorrow, for all you know. I have dealt with this my whole life, and is one of the reasons I started this series. So, if for any reason you feel that my videos help, or if you just feel like you need to talk to someone, I'm a small enough creator at this point. Feel free to comment, and keep it within reason. Obviously, we don't want to anger YouTube, and we don't want to get too serious, because this is just at the end of the day a video about animals. But I feel like I should extend that hand, seeing how I had just recently gone through some rough stuff. Again, better now, all good. We'll be continuing the weekly uploads. Next week, I do plan on doing both the wildebeest species as sort of a catch-up, since technically speaking, this past Monday should have been the black wildebeest. So we're see what we can do to catch back up to where I want to be. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for letting me waffle on. Go outside, touch grass. It's good for your mental health. Tell your parents you love them. Spend time with all the people that mean something to you. And have a good one. Bye-bye.